For others. Yeah, sorry. Can you listen in me right? Everything is
Everything is fine. Everything is good.
okay, perfect. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, depending on the area. This is a big pleasure to be here today, and many thanks for inviting me to present in the real seminars. So the work I'm going to present today is titled Challenging Climate Change, Economic Effect of Regions Interaction from Atmosphere Perspective. And it's a joint work with Lucía Bolea from University of Zaragoza. We are both of us from University of Zaragoza. So the outline of my presentation will be the following. First, I will start presenting the aim of and the motivation of this work, of this paper. I will continue showing the methodology used, starting how we calculate the CO2 emissions. We calculate the CO2 emissions embodied through an input-output model. And later, I will explain the econometrical strategy, focusing in our spatial models. I will continue showing the main resource, and I will finish with some conclusions and policy implications that we can extract from our research. We are still working in this paper, so any comments, suggestion will be really welcome. So starting with the objective, with the increasing concern of climate change and its consequences, this led to the urgent of taking global agreements and cooperation among countries. Besides, if we focus in the IPCC 2014, it established the target of reducing CO2 emissions between 40–70% by 2050. Besides, with globalizations, many interconnected supply chains have arisen. That means that countries are connected among each other and one country influences to other countries. So in that way, in this context, the main aim of this research is to analyze the role of spatial independence in the generation of CO2 emissions, considering not only the economic characteristic or dimension of CO2 emission, but also the atmospheric condition of these emissions. Okay, so starting with the methodology, first I will start with the calculus of CO2 emissions embodied. I will say that for many of you, input-output model is a well-known model. So here we have the equilibrium equations, where X is the output vector, A the matrix of technical coefficients, and Y the final demand vectors. And from this equation, we can do these transformations, obtaining the Leontief inverse that is represented by matrix L. From here, how we calculate our emissions, we basically transform our vector final demand in a diagonal matrix, and we multiply this expression by a diagonal matrix of coefficients of CO2 emissions. In that way, the information that we obtain from here is the CO2 emissions that are associated with trade and with domestic consumption. In order to do this calculus, we use UIUC 2016 release that is constituted by 43 countries and covers the period 2000–2014. With that, I continue, or I start with the econometrical strategy. CO2 emissions, as we will see later, will be the dependent variable, and as we include as independent variables the following ones. First, we obtain from the World Bank GDP in constant prices for the year 2000, population, and energy use per capita. Later, we calculate from WIUC database the ratio of net export respect output, the shares of high technology industry, medium technology industry, and low technology industry for each country, and later the increments of energy sector and low technology and transport sector. Sorry, it is not here. And also we include the direct backward linkage. we include the use of non-renewable energy that we obtain for energy data, and we include also a dummy variable that takes value 1 for those countries that ratify the Kyoto Protocol and value 0 for those countries that don't ratify Kyoto Protocol. So these will be our models. In the first models, as you can see, all the terms that are in levels are expressed in logarithm, except in the case, as I said before, high technology, medium technology, and low technology sectors that are already served. Okay. What is the difference between the first model and the second model? In the first model, we include the Kyoto variable, yes, in adaptive way. However, as our sample is constituted by 43 countries, with standard regions, we have problems because only few countries didn't ratify the Kyoto Protocol. So, in order to solve this problem, we include the Kyoto variable not only in a summative way, but also in a multiplicative way. This is what we saw in the second model. In order to analyze if there is any distinction between including Kyoto, our dummy variable, the Kyoto Protocol in a multiplicative way, then we do the two tests after the running and panel data model, randomly first, and we obtain a really p-value, obtaining that Kyoto distinction is significant. Then our model, or the most proper model, seems to be model 2. And this is the model that we are going to consider from now on. Okay. From that moment, as I said, we only have considered a panel data model, but however, as we can see in that figure, this figure is built from Neora database, and we can see that there are many interconnections between countries, that different classes are formed, but however, there are also interconnections among clusters and among different countries. So this requires the use of spatial models. Before starting explaining the spatial model, we build a weight matrix. Okay, and here there is one of the main contributions of our paper. Usually in literature, we can observe that it is usually used contiguity with matrix. However, in our case, due to the sample that we are working with, is not a good choice because some countries behave as an island. So in our weight matrix, we have some columns and some rows that are complete of zero, full of zeros. Besides, looking at literature, we observe that it is quite important the influence of atmosphere in the transportation of CO2 emissions. So in order to be our weight matrix, what we consider are the movements of CO2 through the direction and in its intensity from one in the upper and lower atmosphere. Besides, if we look at literature, in this case, no more physical literature than economic literature, we observe that upper and lower atmosphere represents these movements more or less 50-50%, and even there are interrelations among them, among the two latitudes. So we consider the movements 50% the upper and 50% the lower. How we do that? First, we consider the movements in the 60th and 30th parallel. Here, the winds flow from the west to the east. However, in the upper bound, winds flow from east to west. So, how finally we construct our weight matrix? We consider for one country, we consider all the countries in the distance of 1,500 kilometers that are in the northwest, southwest, and west of our country of focus. Okay, so with that, we test that there within our data there is a spatial dependence, and during the blue-span element test we obtain a quite small value, what lets us to confirm that there is a spatial correlation. We also check that there is not a spatial autocorrelation error, so our final model is going to be SL's model, okay? So now I'm going to present the results. As you know, with the SLS model, first we obtain the direct effects and obtain the spillover effects. So in this part, I'm going to present the direct effects that we obtain, obtaining that GDP remains significant for non-Kyoto countries. Note that in column 1 appears the results for non-Kyoto countries, and in column 2 appears the results for Kyoto countries. So in the case of GDP, we observe that for non-Kyoto countries, sorry, Kyoto and this is not Kyoto. I confused the columns. The first column is Kyoto countries and the second column is not Kyoto countries, okay? So for Kyoto countries, it's important as well as the non-use of renewable energies and the energy use. However, in the case of variables more related with economic structure, such as energy sector or transport sector, we observe that are significant and with the same sign, negative in the case of energy sector and positive in on transport sector, remain significant for the whole sample, the Kyoto and non Kyoto countries, okay? Well, know that in that case, for instance, as it is positive, the relationship, that means the higher is the share of transport sector in the economy of the countries considered in this sample, the higher will be the CO2 emissions. And this, as I said, in both cases for the Kyoto countries and the non-Kyoto countries, okay? Here again, I have the same mistake, sorry. Here will be the Kyoto countries, one, column 2 will be no Kyoto countries. Here we focus in local spillovers, okay? We obtain that energy sector has effect in my neighbors in the case of Kyoto countries, but no, can you listen in fine? Because I have connection problems right now.
I hear you just fine. You're good.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, as I was saying, in the case of energy sector appears significant, but yes, for the case of Kyoto countries, being a spillover effect, but in the wrong side. That means if my neighbor has an important share of energy sector, then my CO2 emissions will increase. Okay, it is also important to remark the significance of the medium technology sectors, low technology sectors, and transport sector, as well as the use of non-renewable energies. Okay. In the case of medium technology sector and low technology sectors, we observe that we obtain a complementary resource, as the lower is the share of medium technology sectors, the higher would be the CO2 emissions, and the opposite sign we obtain in the case of low technology sectors, okay? It is also interesting to notice that we obtain a different sign, the opposite sign or the opposite behavior between Kyoto countries and non-Kyoto countries that could be related with the characteristics of those countries that didn't ratify Kyoto Protocol. Between the countries that didn't ratify Kyoto Protocol, we have the US, China, or India, for instance. Okay. And just to finish with this presentation, some conclusions. So we can say that after our analysis, there is an spatial dependence, and it is important to consider the interaction among neighbors. As we saw, there are spillovers and there is influence among countries. We also observe the importance of the technology of the structure of the economy, as well as the kind of energy used, and in that sense, we have to mention the importance of transport sector. That is, governments should pay attention to improve the productivity of the productivity of the technology of this sector in order to reduce the effect over CO2 emissions. We also say that Kyoto Protocol makes a structural change that together with the significance of the spillover effects of our analysis so that it is necessary the cooperation among countries in order to solve the problem of CO2 emissions, as the policy of one single country is not enough, as we are in an interconnected world. So this is all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. As I said, we are still working on it, so any comment or suggestion will be really welcome. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Sofía. It's really nice work, and I think that combining economic matrices to build interregional spillover as well as physical matrices, in this case, emissions in the atmosphere, is a wonderful opportunity for, an example of how those two areas are combined with each other. I don't have much comments because, as you know, I was already looking at early versions of this work when Lucia was at REAL and developing some ideas with you. The only question I have is this one. Could you eventually remind us what motivated the choice of WIUD as a database? EORA is another very international IRIO system, or eventually Xiobase. Just, if you don't mind, remind us why WIUD was chosen at the end.
Yeah, first there is a reason, because there is one reason, because we started this work with other ideas, so we continue with the database, but also because we have good information about CO2 emissions, while with other databases as EORA, we don't have this information, and it's more difficult to harmonize all the different kinds of data. So it's because of that. But it's true that we had this limitation because we are considering just 43 countries as a proxy of the whole world. So maybe as a next step, we had to have in mind how to build a new database considering more countries.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Very well. Why don't we collect a few additional comments or questions for you, Sofía?
Okay, thank you.
Sofía, this is Jeff Hewings here. Good afternoon. Thank you for a very nice presentation. I was thinking as you were talking that it might be kind of interesting to look at the structure of climatic interdependence and the structure of trade interdependence, and whether you can see any major differences in that structure, because I think it might be interesting to see the degree to which you get some interesting and very different spillover effects from the trade relationships than from the climatic relationships. And the second question is as you are tracing the CO2 emissions, are you also including those generated by the transportation sector itself? I think there's a lot of evidence that the vessels used to move goods between countries are some of the largest polluters. And I think it might be kind of interesting to add that additional dimension, not just in terms of the production-consumption linkages, but also the transportation linkages. But thanks again for a very nice presentation.
Many thanks, Jeff, for your comments. The first question, if I understood well, you mentioned the characteristics of trade. We just consider we prove with different variables, but the most significant or the most relevant one seems to be the ratio of exports respect output. However, maybe it is interesting to take a look to what you said. So thanks for your comment. about yeah, considering the CO2 emissions. I had to recognize that I didn't do the calculus, so I am not sure about if it is if we're including the emissions directly of the transport sector or not. But we have to check the data, and I will say that you are right that we should include it if it is possible. So many thanks for both of your comments.
Okay, more questions, comments for Sofía?
Yeah, hi Sofía, Stefan Bosk is here from Austria. Actually, I have a question regarding your spatial weight metrics and your CO2 measure. So, so if I got you right, then the basic idea for spatial weight metrics is that you get some wind patterns, and the wind patterns explains your CO2 distribution between the countries in your sample. What I know, but maybe you have to check this, is that CO2, the current CO2 emissions of a country is normally not measured as like how much CO2 is in the atmosphere, but actually it's estimated based on industrial production in a country. So it's not that you have like a measurement station and it measures the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, but what you do is you look at the industrial production structure in the country. You know how much CO2 industrial production produces and energy consumption produces, and by this you estimate the amount of CO2 emissions produced by a country in a year. And if this is the case, then the measure of CO2 is not influenced by wind directions, okay? And so let's say it differently. Have you ever tried your spatial weight metrics just by inverse distance, for example? Because I think that maybe this wind also captures distance between countries, and at the end, distance as a straight costs also doing the job more or less.
Hi, Stefan. Many thanks for your comments. Yeah, you are right. With the input-output model, basically we try to, with the data we have, we consider mainly the CO2 emissions of the production. So maybe you are right in that sense, but we consider that it is interesting to analyze this influence and econometrically since it works. However, we work with another kind of matrices, also with the inverse of the distance. Indeed, here we also did the inverse of the distance, okay? Why in the final version of the matrix, after considering of the wind direction, we also do the inverse of the distance. We try with other matrices, and we have problems with the sample because, for instance, countries such as Australia, the US, or so on, depending of the kind of matrices that we use based on just in distances, as they behave as islands, we have a column and a row full of zeros. So it makes no sense because we have to consider a large distance in order to consider any neighbors in those cases. So because of that, we also try a new weight matrix. However, maybe I can agree that we can also consider as a robustness check other matrices based in an economic performance. It will be another idea. Somehow you are right, but we think that it is interesting, the combination. But maybe we can try to do as a robustness check other matrices based in the production within the or in the economic factor for the country. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more comment or question for Sofía. Well, if not, then thank you so much, Sofía, for your time. Muchísimas gracias. We are going to move from northern Spain to southern Brazil. And Natália, whenever you're ready, and your slides are up, we will listen to you. Natália?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Very well, I can see you and I can hear you.
I'm trying to share.
Okay. Maybe give it a minute. I think Augusto needs to give you co-ownership.
She's already co-host. So.
Oh, okay, co-host. Okay.
I don't know what's happened. Let me see. Ah, here.
Perfect. Yes, I can see your slide and I can hear you. So Natália, whenever you're ready, it's all yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming and attending my presentation. Thank you, Professor Augusto and Professor Sandy, for the invitation. Today, I'm going to present my thesis project, so that's why I don't have my results yet, but I think I can already share with you some interesting information. So let's go. The title of my research is The Valuation of Creativity and the Index of Brazilian Creative Cities. What is their relationship with economic development? In order to be more didactic, I'm going to present this project by 3 essays. So now I'm going to present the idea of my first essay. In my first essay, the objective of my first essay is understand how creativity has become valuable throughout time. So I want to understand the origin of the valuation of creativity, bringing the concepts that are related to it from a bibliographic review that goes beyond the political aspects that involve the elaboration of the concepts of creative economy. There are several concepts related to creativity, such as creative cities, creative economy, creative industries, and I observed that when the literature tried to explain that, they mention that creativity started to be part of the political discussion in 80s in reason of several economic, cultural, and social changes that happened during this time. But most of them don't go deep on this topic and try to understand what happened and try to look back in order to better explain the concepts. I'm proposing this essay. So additionally, the literature says that usually associated this range of concepts to the invention of to the political aspects, such as the invention of the creative industry in England. But in my opinion, the valuation of creativity involves more than political aspects. So for this essay, I'm bringing a theoretical analysis that starting from the most consolidated literature to a specific article. So it's analysis from a general idea to a particular idea. I said that I don't have results, but I can share with you a preliminary perception. And what I'm saying that I'm observing now that the literature says that there are some characteristics positive associated to the creativity. They say that in order to encourage creativity, it's important to stimulate an environment with flexibility, freedom, diversity of knowledge, informal relations. It's important abandonment of stereotypes, low level of hierarchy, flexible jobs. However, if you in the history of humanity, mainly in the first phase of the Industrial Revolution, we could see a less favorable environment to creativity. During these 2 first phases, the cultural values were more rigid, controlled, And we can see the evaluation of satisfaction, leisure, and entertainment. In contrast, in the third phase of the Industrial Revolution, well known as post-industrial age, the society start to, in my perception, start to value much more aesthetic aspects, and we also could see technological developments, a decline of the industrial activities, and the evaluation of self-satisfaction, motivation, and diversity, and it impacts the way that the society start to think about the urban places and cities in general. So I'm trying in this first essay connect these ideas to make a context for my second essay. So now I'm going to present the idea of my second essay. Here I want to identify the creative cities in Brazil. So the main objective is to identify Brazilian creative cities belonging to metropolitan regions through the development of talent, technology, and tolerance indicators, which will compose the index of creative cities. I think about creative cities is to bring an alternative to promote economic development, aligning to the comparative advantage of each places. The concept of creative cities is related to the ability to spur and encourage the local identity and things that are at some point intangible. And so that's why I think it's important develop the idea of creative cities, and we can start do it, identify the creative cities in Brazil. The creative cities, the concept was developed by Landry and Bianchini in the 80s, but was widespread by Richard Florida, who created indicators in order to identify the creative cities in America. But in his opinion, creative cities are places where creative class is predominant. So the creative class is attracted by a creative characteristics in cities, and its concentration can develop high level of aggregated value. In order to measure it, he created indicators that, in his perspective, represent adjectives of creative cities such as talent, tolerance, and technology. I'm based my research in this idea, but of course I'm consider that he was really criticized because his limitation doesn't identify local aspects. So here I'm proposing the indicators that will measure the creative cities in Brazil. We identify the creative cities in Brazil. It's a preliminary proposal. I'm trying to consider our peculiarities, and I think it's a challenge, but because our country is multicultural, and I'm also trying to check all the literatures that trying to do that in order to improve and reflect as much as I can these peculiarities that belongs to us. So here in my methodology, I want to construct a creativity index that will be represented by 3 indexes. The first one represents talent, that will be made by 3 sub-indexes, that is creative class, human capital, and scientific talent. The technology index will be represented by innovation tags, technological innovation index, and research and development index. And the tolerance, it's a measure of diversity. And it will be represented by ethnic diversity, homoaffective index, and religious diversity. And after that, I'm going to present the proposal of my third essay. Of course, it will depend on my second essay, but here I want to understand how talent, technology, and tolerance can interfere with the level of economic development in cities. So this essay is to test whether the availability of this resource in cities identified as creative in the previous essay interferes with their level of economic development. We have in the traditional literature factors that are considered, that are important and that are considered important to interfere in the economic development. But in this case, I'm trying to bring alternatives that can influence the level of economic development. So here I'm bringing some identifier references.
Natália, hold on a second, hold on. Augusto, do you have the way of muting everybody? Because we can hear a second voice in the background.
I'll try, just a minute.
You might mute everybody and then Natália, you're going to unmute yourself. Okay. Yeah, better. Go ahead, Natália.
So, as I was saying, it's a proposal that will contrast the traditional theories that usually relate the economic development to the presence of natural resource, the localization of industries, the offer of employment, and I'm trying to offer a new proposal to think about economic development. So here I just bring some references that I'm basing this idea, the idea to measure the relation of these factors, and as I said, it will depend on the second essay that I'm doing. And the preliminary idea is use a structure equation model. This model is an extension of regression, and it's interesting because it can express the interrelations between variables. So I can check here the interaction between tolerance, talent, and technology, and after that how the creativity index can interfere in the economic development. I'm using as a proxy of economic development the GDP per capita. I know that it's an incomplete variable, but I think it's well known and it can represent quite well the economic development, the level of economic development. So now I'm sharing all the references that I use in this presentation, and that's it. Thank you.
All right, Natália, thank you so much, and sorry for that disruption. I don't know who left their microphone on, but anyway. Your topic is very interesting, but it's a hard topic in my view, for the reason that that definition of creativity is complex because it relies on so many different characteristics. And just like the index created by Richard Florida, I personally find it very difficult to find out what kind of weight is supposed to come into the story with respect to each component of that index you're trying to build. And to some extent, Richard Florida that really emphasized that creative class calculated based on the number of artists or so in a local community was somewhat criticized because there are so many different aspects associated to that creativity. So personally, I don't have much experience with it. I just believe it's a difficult process. The one little piece of advice or just suggestion I have for you, because it's not exactly my topic, is what if you were to actually decompose that creativity by sub-elements? In other words, what if you were to say, okay, we're going to determine first some kind of research creativity, and that one component will be based on really, measurable components such as the number of patents in a city, the number of people who work in science, and so on. And then you move on to a sub or another part of an index called, for instance, artistic creativity, and that could be eventually based on the number of artists in a local population. So that basically that creativity is not necessarily the sum of all those elements, but just is split itself by sub-elements. You will be, in other words, much closer to one type of creativity versus another. But again, it's just a suggestion. I am not super familiar with this particular line of research. But anyway, what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have to consider this kind of thing that I need to I'm trying to improve the idea, improve the idea of my indicators, and trying to differentiate at some point the artistic creativity and the creativity related to other kinds of profession. So it is mentioned on the literature, and it's a challenge. I'm still trying to answer how to do it, but I think it is possible.
Very good. So it means in 1 year you present the results so that we can help us understand this concept a bit better. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natália. If you have comments, questions for Natália, please unmute yourself.
Okay, Natália, Jeffrey Hewings, thank you for a very interesting presentation. I would really encourage you to look at some of the work that the Swedes are doing right now. Charlotte Melenda, whose work you referenced with Florida, has been moving off in a slightly different direction, as is Florida, who I think has become much less satisfied with the sort of early work that he did. And one of the ways that they're looking at this is trying to look at something called related variety. And it goes back to the sort of comment Sandy made about decomposing that index. In other words, what types of creative folks are there and the degree to which their presence will attract other folks. In other words, it's trying to look at if you like, linkages between those creative sectors rather than sort of presenting them as separate entities. But it's much more focused on the individuals rather than the sectors in which they work. And this is being complemented with some very interesting work by Martin Andersson, also in Sweden, who has really explored this in the context of some of the ideas of Ron Bishma and the whole folks who were trying to look at this this idea of what it is that provides the competitive structure. And this is sort of being focused on the whole notion of smart specialization that has become a very popular regional development tool. So I think it would be very interesting for you to explore that literature. And we had a visitor in Rio, Åsa Kakesi, who has just recently finished a PhD in which he has developed several of these ideas into some very, very nice papers that you might want to look at. So I'm happy to share those things with you if you drop me an email. But thank you for a very nice presentation. And like Sandy, I look forward to next year hearing your results.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Great. More comments, questions for Natália?
Hi, Natália. Stefan Boski speaking. I have actually, I'm not a specialist in the topic, but maybe I have one or two ideas which could be interesting. So regarding your third paper, the topic 3, with the impact of creativity on economic development, which is in some way where you have the challenge that is the reverse causality. So it's very difficult to say what affects what. Is it the economic development or the GDP which affects the creativity, because you can build universities there or research centers, or I don't know what, or is it the other way around? So it goes in the same direction, like all the papers looking at the impact of something on economic development. And so maybe you think about, and then I was thinking, I'm coming from Europe, I'm from Austria, and in Europe, this creativity development is very much based on historical development. So how it was like, I don't know, 100 or 200 years ago in Europe, it started to build like creative clusters, but you're still able to measure today, in some way, the creativity which were hosted by former, how do you say, kings and emperors. These hotspots in medieval times and in between are still present today. So maybe you can think about, looking in your case, if you find some of these historic patterns which you can exploit as an exogenous variation, which explains, which you can use as an instrument for your creativity today and to estimate the economic development effect. You can look in all these economic development papers looking at the impact of institutions on economic development and so on and so forth. They look at all these historic things, and maybe you find something there. Maybe you find a nice break in historical development of universities, of art centers, and so on and so forth, which can explain your part of your creativity intensity in an area today. I know maybe, and the other thing I was thinking about is, which I think would be interesting, but given that I have no idea about the literature, maybe there's thousands of literature on it. But to look at all these agglomeration effects. So what I would expecting is that if you have one or two creative people, then you have spillovers on the next people as well. So that, you have something like a creative mind can make another creative mind and another creative mind, and somebody cluster. And I know maybe you can explore this. These clustering effects of creativity. So I don't think it's randomly spread over the country, but it clusters. And maybe you can explore it a little bit in that direction. I know, but given that I don't know exactly what's done, what's not done.
Okay, perfect. Yes, related to the third essay, as I said, it will depend on my second essay, and also we intend to give. To select more variables in order to give more robustness to the model. And so I have a lot of work to do. But thank you for your comment and your opinion. I'm going to pay attention on that too. So that's it, thank you.
Sounds good. We have time for one more comment or one more question for Natália. Well, if not, then I think we're going to leave it to that. So thank you so much again. Thanks to Augusto and Eduardo for organizing. Thank you so much to Natália and to Sofía. It's once again a very international seminar. This is one of the good aspects of COVID, is that we end up being extremely international with those seminars. Thank you so much to the two of you for the presentations. And I look forward to seeing everyone next week, same time, same location. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.